I was 34 years old, a commercial airline pilot, living what many would consider a good life. I was married to Maria, the woman I loved deeply, and together we had two beautiful children, Ethan and Lily. Life had settled into a familiar rhythm: work, family, the occasional weekend getaway, and always making sure the bills were paid. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. We were content, comfortable. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I was a man of simple desires. I loved the quiet mornings with my kids, the feeling of the plane taking off, and knowing that I was providing for my family. I flew long-haul international flights, spending several days at a time away from home. Being away from Maria and the kids was always tough, but I made sure to call them every night, no matter how late it was. We'd talk about everything and nothing: Ethan's school projects, Maria's day, the things Lily was learning. Even though we were miles apart, I always felt connected to them. But it wasn't just the family life I appreciated. I loved flying. The calmness of the skies, the orderliness of it all, the sense that everything was within my control. Up there in the cockpit, I felt powerful, like the world was just a button away from being right where I wanted it. In those days, I didn't give much thought to the big questions in life. Sure, I believed in God, but I wasn't what you would call devout. I said a prayer occasionally, especially before a big flight, but I rarely thought much about the deeper meaning of things. Life to me was something to be lived moment to moment, a series of small victories and routine days. I wasn't worried about the future. There wasn't a sense of impending doom hanging over me. I had my family, I had my job, and everything seemed to be progressing as it should. What could go wrong? I suppose that was the mistake I made. Like most people, I had the habit of thinking that life was predictable, that it followed certain rules and patterns. Things just worked. Sure, we had our challenges, tough days at work, moments when I missed the kids. But there was nothing that felt truly out of place. I thought I had it all figured out. What I didn't realize was that life had a way of throwing curveballs, and mine was coming faster than I could ever imagine. The flight that changed everything started off as any other. The skies were clear, the weather was perfect, and we were making good time to our destination. The passengers were settled, the crew was calm, and I could already picture the reunion with Maria and the kids in my mind. This flight, like all the others, would be just another chapter in the book of my career. But as we neared our descent, something went terribly wrong. I remember the moment it happened. The smooth, calm flight suddenly jolted, as if a powerful hand had reached out from the skies and grabbed us. A loud, metallic groan came from the plane's engines, followed by an eerie silence. That was when I realized something was horribly, terribly wrong. The first hint of panic was subtle. The cockpit went quiet as I checked the systems, trying to diagnose the problem, but nothing was working as it should. I remember the way my heart began to race, but I tried to keep my composure, thinking about Maria and the kids. I didn't want them to ever know fear, not if I could avoid it. I spoke calmly to the co-pilot, trying to figure out the issue, but deep down, I knew this wasn't something we could solve. This was a mechanical failure, the kind of thing that couldn't be fixed in midair. I couldn't believe it. How could this be happening? Panic began to seep into the cockpit, creeping up like a shadow that you could feel but not yet see. The descent was happening too quickly, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The systems we relied on, those life-saving technologies that I had put so much trust in, were failing. I remember my hands gripping the controls, trying to pull us out of the descent, trying to steady the plane, but the response was sluggish, uncooperative. It felt like the world was slipping away, out of my reach, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't hold on to it. As we fell, I had flashes of memories, moments from my life that I had almost forgotten. My wedding day with Maria, the birth of my children, the first flight I ever piloted, the nights when we sat as a family, watching movies together. These memories flashed before me like a montage, but they were not comforting. They were a reminder of everything I had taken for granted, everything I had neglected. Suddenly it all seemed so fragile, so fleeting. My life, my family, everything I had ever worked for. It was all in danger, and I was powerless to stop it. The descent felt like an eternity, but in reality, it happened within moments. Time warped in those final seconds. I could hear the screams of the passengers, but they felt distant, muffled, as though I were hearing them underwater. My mind was focused, not on the terror of the moment, but on the overwhelming sense that I was about to lose everything. My life, my family, the future I had imagined for us. In those last moments, I felt a kind of peace, but it wasn't the peace of acceptance. It was a peace born of inevitability. There was no escaping what was happening, no way to undo it. I braced myself for the impact, knowing that this was the end. The impact came, not with a violent crash, but with a sudden, sharp jolt that seemed to snap the world into a new dimension. I felt the seatbelt dig into my chest, the pressure building around me, and then, nothing. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the world. The noise of the crash was gone. The chaos of the flight seemed to fade away, and all that remained was a strange, quiet emptiness. I could no longer feel my body, no longer sense the pain. It was as though I had been lifted from the world, floating above it. And in that moment, I understood something deeply profound. My life, everything I had known, had just ended. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Something else awaited me. The world around me ceased to exist. Everything that I had once known, the noise, the chaos, the terror of the crashing plane, vanished in an instant. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I was no longer tethered to the physical world. It wasn't a painful experience. In fact, there was no pain at all. Instead, I felt a strange release, as though I had been freed from some invisible weight. My body seemed to slip away, and I was no longer confined by its limitations. There was no fear, no panic, just a sense of calm that washed over me completely. For the first time in my life, I felt weightless, suspended in a vast, dark void, with no boundaries, no walls, nothing to hold me down. At first, it was disorienting. I couldn't see anything clearly, only the faintest shadows around me. I had no sense of time, no way to measure how long I had been here, floating in this dark and silent space. Yet, in that silence, there was peace, unlike anything I had ever known before. The turbulence of my thoughts settled into stillness, and I felt completely, utterly at ease. The chaos of the crash, the screams of the passengers, the helplessness I had felt moments before, all of it seemed so distant now, irrelevant even. I wasn't even sure I had a body anymore, but it didn't matter. I existed only in this profound peace, a stillness so complete it was almost sacred. As I drifted in this boundless space, I began to sense something, a faint pull in the distance. At first, it was nothing more than a subtle glow, a hint of light far away. But the glow quickly grew brighter, more intense, and it drew me toward it as though I had no control over the movement. I was being pulled forward, not by force, but by a gentle, irresistible pull, like a flower reaching toward the sun. The light wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm, soft, and inviting. It felt like everything I had been searching for my entire life, though I couldn't yet understand why. The closer I got, the more familiar it seemed, like it was something I had known, deep down, for as long as I could remember. And then, standing in the center of the light, I saw him. A figure, not tall or imposing, but radiating a quiet strength, an aura of love and understanding that seemed to fill every corner of my being. The figure wasn't just visible, it felt alive, vibrating with energy, but it wasn't an energy that exhausted me. It was comforting, soothing, a kind of warmth that I could feel in my very soul. As the figure stepped forward, I could see more clearly now, and there he was, Jesus. I had believed in him, of course, but I never imagined that I would come face to face with him. There was no thunderous announcement, no grandeur, just a man. Simple, yet everything about him radiated divine peace. I didn't know how to react. In the presence of this being, everything I had known about life, about myself, seemed to fall away. I felt no fear, no anxiety, only peace, overwhelming peace. The weight of my struggles, the guilt I had carried for years, the regrets, the fears about what would become of my family, all of it disappeared in an instant. He didn't speak at first. He simply stood there, looking at me with eyes full of compassion, understanding, and a kind of sorrow that I couldn't quite comprehend. It wasn't sorrow for me, but something deeper, a sorrow for the state of the world, for the choices humanity had made. His gaze was so tender, so knowing, that I couldn't help but feel as though he had known me my entire life. And then he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it was deep and resonant, as though it came from within me, echoing in my very soul. It wasn't just the sound of his words that reached me, it was the weight of them, the love behind them. "Do not be afraid," he said gently, his words wrapping around me like a warm embrace. "You are here because there is something I need to show you, something that will help you understand why you've lived the way you have, and why you will return to your world." His voice held no judgment, no condemnation, just pure, unfiltered love. I didn't feel undeserving or ashamed. I felt accepted, as though every mistake, every imperfection had been forgiven long before I could ask for it. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, but words didn't come. It was as though the very act of speaking would somehow diminish the sacredness of the moment. There was nothing I could say that would be enough. I simply stood there, listening, absorbing the profound love that emanated from him. It was more than just warmth or kindness. It was a depth of love that I could never have comprehended in life. In that moment, I understood something deeper about life, about humanity, about why we are here. But I didn't fully grasp it yet. It was like being on the edge of a vast ocean, knowing that there was something immeasurable beyond the horizon, something waiting for me to understand. As I stood there, still unable to speak, Jesus began to show me things, visions that filled me with both awe and confusion. I was shown glimpses of the world I had left behind, but not as I had known it. I saw people in suffering, caught in cycles of violence, fear, and greed. I saw the earth, beautiful but ravaged by human carelessness. The weight of it all pressed down on me, and yet, in the midst of the despair, there was hope. Small sparks of light began to flicker in the darkness. I saw individuals, not powerful figures or great leaders, but ordinary people, reaching out to help one another, offering love and care where there was none. These small acts of kindness were like seeds being planted, and though they seemed insignificant in the face of the world's pain, they were powerful, transformative. Through it all, Jesus remained silent, watching me, letting me absorb what he was showing me. I understood that what he was revealing was not just a glimpse of the future, but a glimpse of what could be, the potential within each of us to choose love over fear, faith over doubt. I saw the possibility of a world healed, not through grand miracles, but through the simple, humble choices we make every day. But I also saw the fragility of it all. Humanity stood at a crossroads. There was a chance for spiritual awakening, but it wasn't guaranteed. It depended on the choices we made, on the choices I would make when I returned. I felt the weight of the responsibility settle on my heart. What I was witnessing was not just a dream or some distant fantasy. It was reality, something that was unfolding even as I stood there in his presence. Jesus wasn't just showing me the world's future. He was showing me my role in it. He was asking me to help change the course, to be part of the transformation, to take the message of love, hope, and faith back with me. And I realized that this moment, this meeting, wasn't just a gift. It was a calling. I had been chosen to return and to share what I had seen. The love that surrounded me wasn't just meant for me, it was meant for the world. Jesus raised his hand, and in that instant, I felt a shift within me. It was as though the very air around us had thickened, charged with divine energy. A wave of vision swept over me, and in a flash I was shown 5 key events. Events so monumental that they would forever alter the course of humanity by the year 2025. I was not just witnessing them passively. It felt as though I was inside them, experiencing them in real time, with an eerie detachment. I could see every detail, the sounds, the sights, the emotions, but I was not bound by them. These weren't ordinary events. These were world-changing, seismic shifts that would affect millions, even billions of lives. The magnitude of it all was overwhelming. The first vision was a series of violent natural disasters, raging wildfires, massive earthquakes, and tsunamis that destroyed entire cities. People desperately ran for safety, but nature's wrath was unstoppable. The destruction was overwhelming, and it felt like a wake-up call from the earth, showing the consequences of humanity's neglect. By the time the damage was done, it was too late. Many lives were lost, their cries drowned out by the chaos. Then the vision shifted, and I saw political unrest on a scale I had never imagined. Countries that once appeared stable descended into anarchy, with governments torn apart by corruption, greed, and power struggles. I watched as world leaders, who had once been respected and powerful, crumbled under the weight of their decisions. I saw protests in the streets, entire nations on the brink of collapse. The system that held the world together was failing, and no one seemed to know how to stop it. I watched helplessly as leaders made decisions that only led to more division, more hatred, more war. Innocent lives were caught in the crossfire, their futures uncertain. What was once a world of stability had become a breeding ground for conflict. The images of this unrest, people fighting, governments falling, cities being torn apart, filled me with dread. And yet there was something else in the air, an undercurrent of hope, buried beneath the surface of destruction, waiting to emerge. The third vision showed a spiritual decline. Churches were empty, with abandoned pews and untouched altars. People had turned inward, focused on material wealth, replacing faith with greed. The world had become a place of loneliness and self-interest, where suffering was ignored. Yet amidst the darkness, I saw a faint light, a potential for spiritual awakening if people returned to their faith. The possibility of healing was fragile, but it left me with a deep longing for humanity to rediscover its spiritual roots before it was too late. The next vision was of a technological revolution, but not the kind we had hoped for. While technology had brought advancements that improved life in many ways, it also created a new kind of alienation. I saw people more connected to their devices than to the people around them. Families sat in silence at dinner tables, each person glued to their screens, unable to connect with each other. Relationships were strained, isolated, disconnected. I saw people looking down at their phones more than they looked into each other's eyes. The devices that were meant to bring us closer together had instead driven a wedge between us. The human connection, once strong and vibrant, was now fading. The consequences of this digital age were evident, but not yet fully realized. I saw a future where people had forgotten how to truly connect, how to love, how to be present with one another. The world had become more efficient, but at what cost? The final vision filled me with hope. I saw ordinary people, not leaders, coming together in small, humble groups. They weren't interested in power or wealth, but in love, faith, and compassion. These individuals spread messages of unity and kindness, healing the world one person at a time. They built bridges, not walls, and their movement gained momentum. It was a quiet spiritual revolution, and these humble people would lead a revival, showing the world that there was still hope and a chance to turn back from destruction. The light around me seemed to brighten as I absorbed these visions, and I could feel the weight of them pressing down on me. These were not just distant possibilities, they were real. They were unfolding even as I stood there in the presence of Jesus. I could feel the urgency of it all. Humanity was on a precipice, and it was up to us to choose which path we would take, the path of destruction or the path of love and redemption. These visions were not given to me to frighten me, but to show me the potential that lay before us. We could choose to continue down the path of greed, violence, and spiritual emptiness, or we could choose a path of healing, compassion, and faith. It was a choice that every single person on earth would have to make, and it was a choice that would determine the future of the world. I felt a sense of responsibility settle over me, a weight heavier than any burden I had ever carried. I had been shown these events for a reason. I had been given a glimpse into the future, not just for myself, but for the world. It was a calling, a mission, a purpose that I could no longer ignore. The message of love and hope was not just for me, it was for everyone. I had seen what could happen, and I had been given the chance to share it with others. It was a gift, yes, but also a responsibility. The world would need to wake up. People needed to know that change was possible, that through love, through faith, through small acts of kindness, the world could be healed. I knew my purpose now. I had to be part of that healing. I had to spread the message of love, of hope, and of faith. And I would do whatever it took to help others see what I had seen. The moment I was brought back, everything around me seemed suddenly more real, more tangible. My body felt heavy, as if it had been detached from the world for a long time, and now the weight of it was almost unbearable. I could feel the cold, hard surface beneath me, the dirt, the metal, the remnants of the crash, the chaos of the crash site, the screams of the survivors, the distant sirens. None of it mattered. It all seemed so far away now. I had returned, but not as the same person. I had been transformed, and with this transformation came something new, something profound. A mission, a calling, a responsibility. I had been given a message, a vision that could not be ignored, and it was now my duty to fulfill it. As I slowly rose to my feet, the immediate panic of the crash site began to fade into the background. My body was battered and bruised, but alive. I could feel the cuts, the bruises, the aches, but none of that mattered. I was alive. I was here, but it wasn't just physical survival that mattered anymore. There was something deeper, something greater at play. As I stood, my mind raced back to Maria and the kids. They were the first thing on my mind, the ones I needed to protect, to love, to be with. But it wasn't just a simple desire to return to my family. It was more than that. I had to share with them what I had seen. I had to tell them about the vision, the warning, the hope. I could not keep this to myself. The urgency burned inside me. Time was running out and the world needed to change. The thought of returning home filled me with urgency and quiet fear. I couldn't go back to my old life after seeing the future. Destruction, chaos, and the breakdown of everything we valued were unfolding, but there was still hope. It wasn't too late to change things. However, I knew that the message of love, faith, and spiritual awakening I carried wouldn't be easily accepted in a world distracted by fear and struggle. Despite the challenges, I knew it was my responsibility to share this vision and guide others toward the light. As I made my way through the wreckage of the crash site, a sense of calmness settled over me. The chaos around me seemed insignificant in comparison to the clarity I felt in my mind and heart. The world was shifting, and I had been chosen to help guide others through that shift. The path ahead was uncertain, but I felt a new resolve. This was not about survival, it was about purpose. I had been given the gift of vision, the gift of insight, and it was now my mission to use it to help others. But the road ahead would not be easy. People were entrenched in their ways, caught up in the distractions of their lives, unwilling or unable to see the deeper truths that I had seen. I would face resistance, rejection, and doubt. But I was no longer afraid. I was not alone in this. The light that had guided me would continue to guide me, and I would share that light, no matter how difficult the journey. With every step I took toward home, toward my family, the weight of the world seemed to grow heavier on my shoulders. It wasn't just the physical weight, it was the emotional and spiritual weight. I had seen the future, and with that knowledge came a profound responsibility. I could no longer live just for myself, for my own comfort or security. My life had a greater purpose now. It was no longer about being a pilot, a father, or a husband. Those roles were important, but they were secondary to the purpose that had been revealed to me. I was called to something bigger, something more significant. I had been given a vision of hope, and it was now my job to share that vision with the world, to help guide humanity back to a path of love, faith, and kindness. I couldn't help but think about how I would share this with Maria and the kids. How would I explain what I had seen? How could I tell them that I had been given this knowledge, this responsibility, and that the world we lived in was on the verge of something catastrophic? I knew they would be scared, confused, perhaps even dismissive. But I also knew that they were the ones I needed to reach first. If I couldn't help them understand the urgency of what I had seen, how could I help anyone else? The weight of this realization settled even more heavily on my heart. This wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. Our world was in danger, and I had been given the chance to make a difference. The closer I got to home, the more I realized that I wasn't just returning to the life I had left. Everything was different now. I was different. The world I had known before, the one of routine, comfort, and control, was no longer the world I lived in. There was a new urgency in everything I did, a new sense of clarity in my actions. I wasn't just walking home. I was walking toward my new purpose. The old life I had lived, the familiar patterns of work and family, would still be there, but they would no longer define me. I had a greater calling now. My role was no longer just to be a provider, a protector. My role was to be a messenger, a beacon of hope and love in a world that desperately needed it. When I finally arrived home, Maria was there waiting for me. She rushed to me, her face filled with relief and joy. But as I embraced her, I felt a deep sense of heaviness. I wanted to tell her everything, to share with her the vision that had changed my life. But I knew the time wasn't right yet. She needed to feel safe first. She needed to know that I was truly home before I could reveal what I had seen. But even in the midst of our reunion, I knew that I was no longer the same man. I had a new mission, a new purpose. And though I couldn't share everything with her right away, I knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but it was the path I was meant to walk. As the days passed, I began to find ways to share the message I'd been given. It wasn't about preaching or forcing people to listen. It was about living the truth I had been shown. I began to see small shifts in the people around me, little moments of connection, of kindness, of love. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I knew that change wouldn't come overnight, but the seeds had been planted. My purpose, the purpose that had been given to me in that moment of near death, was to help guide others back to the light, to remind them of the love and hope that still existed in the world. I was no longer just a pilot. I was a messenger, a beacon of hope, a light in the darkness. And I would continue to walk this path no matter how hard it became. Every step I took felt more purposeful, more intentional. The more I shared, the more I saw the world begin to shift. People were waking up, seeing the truth, and beginning to reconnect with each other. It wasn't just about grand gestures or major events. It was in the small moments, the everyday acts of kindness, the quiet conversations that sparked change. I had seen the future, but I also knew that the future wasn't set in stone. We still had the power to change it, to shape it with our choices. And every day, as I walked the path of love and hope, I knew that I was playing a part in that change. My life had found its true purpose, and with each passing moment, I became more certain that I was exactly where I was meant to be.